Webinar Tuesday, everybody. Thanks for joining me again. We are going to kind of be, it's a continuation of last month. Everybody liked the compositing that I did last time, so I decided to do a part 2. And I have just 2 projects planned today because these are a little bit more involved. So hopefully you will still get lots of ideas from this, which is always our plan. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat box. I have it open, as does Dave, so we will try and answer things as I go along. So today, I'm going to show you the finished project first, which you probably saw in the blog advertising and newsletter. I'm going to open up the TIFF file, and then we're going to go through everything step by step. So this was a project that I did actually a few years ago, but I really liked it, and I think it's a great example of what you can do with various components to create your own look. I know I mentioned last month that a lot of my inspiration comes from Pinterest, and I did put the, let's see, do I have it saved here? I think I have it somewhere. I'll show you at the end. And it really was very different than this. It was like music notes and just some butterflies, but it just gave me the idea of using some of these butterflies. And these I did photograph up at Magic Wings in Massachusetts when we were there with one of the many times I've been there with my camera club. So let's get started. So for those of you who did purchase the notes already, you're actually going to have it easier putting this together because some of these components, I couldn't even remember where I got them from or find them in my files. So I resaved them out of the finished project, so they're going to kind of easily go into place, which you'll see as I'm doing this. But you can always try other things too. You don't have to just use the components I give you. This is to give you the inspiration and let you be able to follow along with the webinars. But definitely feel free to use other components as well. So we're going to start with a new blank file. I always like to have that white layer at the bottom in case I want to reduce the opacity of my first layer. We have that white base that we can use below that. So for this project, I started, again, because this was already a finished project, I went with 12 by 16. I always use 300 DPI RGB for my color. You can use, in this case, either 8 or 16. Usually for these kind of projects, I do 8-bit, which is sufficient. I'm not doing any, super high-res color type stuff here. We want a white background, an sRGB, and we'll say create. And just like with most of the things that I do, this can be done in any program that can do layers, not just Photoshop. You can do it in Elements, Affinity, On1. There's countless programs, so anything that can do layers, you can do this project in. So we're going to start with the white layer, and first I'm going to bring in my background texture. And as you know, if most of you have watched me before, I work with 2 monitors, so I'm usually dragging things from the other monitor because it makes it simpler, but I'll do a quick the first one without using the second monitor, so you can see how to bring it in if you are working on one monitor. So you would go to File, Open, and then go to the folder where you have the component that you want. So I'm going to go into here and here, and then I change my view so I can see what I have in here. And this is the background we're going to start with. So I'm going to double click it. So when you open it this way, you still have 2 files. You have your file and your component. You're going to grab the Move tool. I'm going to click and pull down on this tab so that I can see them side by side once I let go. Click in the middle of the texture or item with your Move tool. Click, hold, and drag your cursor over the other project. Then we can close that. And then we're going to size this to our canvas, which it should fit already and pretty much does. And there you have it. So this particular item is scrapbook paper that I photographed. So I loved all the swirls in it, and that was kind of the inspiration for this, as well as, you know, the original image that I saw on Pinterest. But I just liked all these swirlies, and we're going to add to that with some brush work in a second. First, we're going to say, let's see, we've got a question. Robin says, I use elements and can't figure out how to bring in 2 photos or layers. It's very similar to this. I will, I'll put something in Thursday's blog on that, Robin, because Dave does that a lot in his tutorials when we do our webinars. So I'm going to quickly just jot that down, because you can do it. It's just, it's slightly different. You actually drag, rather than dragging from the tab, you're going to drag it from your photo bin. You're going to have both images open in the photo bin and then drag one over the other. Okay, so I made myself a note so I remember to do that. And Mary says, how do you keep the texture image strokes from being pulled too thinly when you resize to your project? Well, this one I already knew was pretty much to that size, so I didn't really stretch it very much. It was just a tiny fraction. Unless you were really stretching it to a huge size, which I wouldn't do. I like to try and have my original images usually be close to the size, especially when I'm using like textures or backgrounds. And most backgrounds that you would find, like if you were photographing this, it would actually be bigger. So you'd probably have to reduce the size. If you were buying textures, I usually make my textures either 10 by 15 or 15 by 15, my newer ones. So they're big enough that you're not going to have to really stretch them too much. So good questions. Good start, everybody. Thanks. Alrighty, so first we are going to add some more brush work to this. So we're going to add a new blank layer, because we always want to stamp our brushes on a separate layer so we can move them. And then I'm going to come over to my brush tool. And in the notes, I do give you the link to these brushes. These are not my brushes, so I cannot give them to you, but I gave you the link of where you can find them, and they are free. It's on a site called Obsidian Dawn, and they have lots of great brushes on there. It's one of my sites that I go to. These are from that site. The free version is for personal use only. So always be sure to check your terms of use when you get things from the web, especially with free things. A lot of times it's only for personal use, which means you cannot sell the finished product with those in there. With this set, they offer a license for $4 if you were going to use it in a commercial project, which is pretty cheap. Alrighty, so from here, I already have mine downloaded somewhere in here. Let's close this folder, and they are called Swirl Parts. Let's go down here. Oh, here they are. I already have it open. So if you did not have it in here yet, once you've downloaded any brush set, it's going to come as a zip file, and it's the ABR file that you're going to import to Photoshop. That's a brush file. And to do that, if you didn't have them in here, you would come up to this gear wheel and say import brushes, and go to where they are on your, you can see I have a whole folder full of brushes. You would just double click it and it would load at the bottom of your brush panel.
What's the name of the brush
So
company?
the brush company is Obsidian Dawn. You're going to type this, dear?
Yes, you go.
You'll put it in the link. OBSIDIAN Dawn.com. And these are called Swirl Parts, so you can search for it by that. No, Linda, these cannot be used commercially unless you purchase the license. Okay, so once you have your brushes in here, for these particular ones, I am going to start with brush number 16. And I want to change my color. And I selected this color out of the image. So I'm going to change this to 535C71. Again, I only know this because I've done these before, but you would select a color, and you can always change it because we are doing these on a separate layer. And I'll show you how to do that as well. So I want this brush in the upper left, but it's kind of like upside down of what I actually want. So you can change the angles of your brushes. I have my brush panel docked over here on this toolbar. And if you don't, you would just go to Window and Brush Settings, and it would open this exact same panel. And then there are a couple things you can change in here. If you want to rotate, if you're doing lots of stamping, like when we're creating textures. But if you go under the Brushes tab, back over here, we can change the angles of our brush. So let's go to, hey, where's my little grid? I know I've done this before. Where'd it go? I don't want texture. That's weird. Always love when things are different when you do them one time from when you do them another time. Normally there's a little grid here with a little thing you can rotate the brush. So we're going to do it another way. There's always more than one way to skin a cat. So again, because we're doing it on a separate layer, I'm going to rotate it once I stamp it. So I'm just going to stamp this anywhere on this canvas right now, and I want it to be at 900 pixels. So I'm using my left bracket key, and you'll see if you look up here at the size, it'll go in 100-point increments. And I want to make sure my opacity and flow are at 100%. And I'm going to just click once. And you can see it's a very fine brush. And then I'm going to use my Move tool, and I can just rotate it. And I'm going to turn this off for a second just so you can see the brush a little better. So I'm just putting my cursor outside the corner, and I'm going to rotate it to about the way I want. And then I can just drag it up to the corner, which is where I know I wanted it. About there. And anytime you're dragging something like this, when you click on it to move it, make sure you're clicking on pixels that have some color, because if you click in the blank area, it won't. Well, this time it does, but usually it won't do anything. So I always try and make sure to click on the pixels that are holding color. So that's our first brush stroke. And you see it's very subtle. These are not real dramatic, but we can also change those with blending modes later. So I'm going to do the next ones on another different layer. So I'm going to add a new layer. We're going to go back to the brush panel. And I'm going to choose a different brush for this one. It's out of the same set, but I'm going to use brush number 16. This one we just used. I'm going to use 18. And we're going to stamp this one twice. I'm using the same color. And this one I'm going to make 900 pixels. Nope, that was the first one. Sorry. Yeah, 900 on this one. Actually, that one I should have made bigger so we can change that too. That's why we keep them on separate layers. So this one I'm going to stamp once right up here in the corner. And then I'm going to rotate it. Let's see if we get the rotate. What is going on? That's really weird. There's usually a panel in here. That's bizarre. I did make this 8-bit, so that's odd. Very weird. I've never seen that happen. But there should have been another one, another little control there. So let's use another blank layer, and then we can just rotate it. So the second one I'm going to put kind of over here, and then I'm going to use, again, my Move tool. And I wanted this one to go about like that. And I'm going to bring it down to about here. I want it closer to the edge and a little below this white one. So that's why by having them on separate layers, you can move them around. And if you want to move something just a little bit, sometimes when you move it with the cursor, it wants to like lock to a position. If you use your arrow keys on your keyboard, you can move it 1 pixel at a time. I don't know if you can see that I'm moving it left, like 1 pixel at a time, or you can go right or up or down. So you can move it just slightly if you're trying to bump something into a position. So I'm going to go back to this first brush and we're going to make that a little bit bigger. There we go, because that's literally what I wanted. Alrighty, and then we've got one more. I'm going to add one more layer. And then we're going to grab a different brush. We're going to use this number 3. And we're going to make that one 500 pixels. And I'm sure I'm not going to get the handles in here. Oh, that's just odd. Let's say that again. In the brush panel, you need to put your cursor on the words, not the checkbox. Well, I know that, but usually the, yeah, if you were changing one of these, but this isn't what I'm changing. There should be another, right in here, a box that lets you control the rotation. Box saying control off. No, that's just for that setting there. Yeah. Technology. It's always wonderful, except when it doesn't do what we want it to do. But there's more than one way to skin a cat, so we're still going to get there. So I'm just going to click this one. I'm at, let's see, my authorized size, 500 pixels. Again, grab our move tool. I'm going to rotate this one. And let's bring it down kind of in between these. And that's our brushes. Alrighty. So the brush panel at the top. I gotta go back to my brush tool. Brush tip shape. Oh, well, that's bizarre. Brush tip, I guess it usually defaults there, and for some reason it wasn't. That's the way it should look. Okay, so brush tip shape. So thank you, Joanne. I'm like, why isn't it there? It's always there. And I guess it usually defaults to it, but for some reason today it wasn't. So this is where you would change the angle of your brush. In this case, I wanted this one to be at 70 degrees. So you just can take one of these arrows and turn it to wherever you want it to be. And you don't have to worry about the lines because you're just stamping at one time. So I got pretty close to that. All right. Interesting. So those are our brush layers. And if you wanted to, you could always rename these with the different brushes if you wanted to remember what you were doing there. You know, you can do that as well. Judy said, oh, never mind, she figured it out. Yeah, if you're seeing like my picture or something on the Zoom, there's usually a little double line between like the screen and the Zoom thing. You can drag that to the right so that you can see this full screen. I have no control over that. That's just the way the view comes up. And there's also a view button up in the top that will usually let you change the view that you're seeing. Alrighty, so now we have some extra little brushes in here. So now we're going to bring in a texture, and I'm going to drag it from my other window. And this is one of mine. And normally when I'm using a texture that's, you know, a horizontal and my image is a vertical or vice versa, I would rotate this, but I wanted to keep the angle of the texture itself. So I'm just going to make this bigger and cover it up this way. And I want to move this in, it's right about there. So you're not limited to the texture being the exact size of your canvas. You can always stretch it beyond that to use a certain part of it. Obviously, you don't want to go too far, as someone mentioned in the beginning, because then you would start distorting things. But doing it like this, I generally don't have any problem with that. So obviously, we need to change our blending mode at this point and our opacity. So we're going to change this one to soft light. And I brought it back to about 66%. So we've added a little more blue tone to our image. Next, I'm going to bring in another texture. This one is not mine. I actually don't know where I got it. Because back when I created this project, I hadn't done any of the watercolor textures yet, so I probably have something similar. but I know this one was not mine. I have not a clue. So I'm going to do a little bit of move tool here because it just isn't quite matching the edge. We don't want to have a white border there. And this one I am going to change to a blending mode that I don't use very often with textures is linear light. And this just really changes the color more than the brightness of the image, but what brought this way down, I have to about 15%. So you can see we have that. And then I actually duplicated this one and used it again. So I did a Control J to duplicate that layer. And this one we're going to change to blending mode color, which I also don't use very often, with an opacity of 54%. So just added a little more of that color to it. Okay, so now we're going to add some more elements to our background. I wanted to do some writing and some kind of, like scripty kind of stuff. And again, these were brushes. My brushes are a mess right now. And so I've saved these layers from the finished project. So they're actually coming in as PNGs rather than brushes, but I know they originated as brushes. So this one, you can see, is just some writing. And I brought it in, it's already sized because I did save it that way. And this one I changed the blending mode to divide, also one I don't use very often because I wanted it to be a lighter color, not a dark color. And then bring the opacity back. And then the next one I brought in, this is one of my own. This is from my postcard brush set. It's got postcard, the words that say postcards and some postmarks. This is from 1916, from an old postcard I found at, I think, a tag sale or a flea market. And we're also going to change this one to divide. And then I lowered that opacity way down because it's a bolder image than this first one was. So I wanted them to kind of be comparable in color. And then I had one more script for the lower right. And where'd it go? Oh, I forgot to hit the check mark on that one, that's why. Always got to hit the check mark or it won't let you do anything else. So then we can bring in our next one. Hit the check mark. You can see this is writing down here. This one I'm changed to screen, worked better to give it that same kind of lighter color. And we're going to make that one 80%. So these three now have similar coloring, but it's really jazzed up that background. All right, so next, this element, I know where I got it, but I couldn't find the original. So again, I've saved it, but I didn't save it the exact size, so we have to do a little bit of resizing. I'm going to bring this one in. This was from a bundle from Design Cuts, one of the companies that I love to purchase from. I am an affiliate for them, so if you want to get anything there, let me know. And this one I am going to resize down a little bit. And I wanted it, that looks about right from my finished one in my notes. And this one I'm going to also do the divide and then bring back the opacity to about there, so that they're all about the same now. Alrighty, so now we're going to bring in our butterflies. Again, I've already selected these. These were from photos that I took. So let me bring in the first one. And it's going to plop into position because I am dragging it in that way. But you can see it's on a separate layer and it saved even the drop shadow that I had added to it. So that is also saved to this, so it kind of saved you a step, but I'll show you how I added that after I get the other two in there. So we're going to bring the first one. Oops, gotta hit that check mark. Come on. There it goes. Bring in number 2. You can also hit the enter key if you don't want to hit the check mark. Same thing. And number 3. And those are in the position I wanted. So to add a drop shadow, you would just double click on one of these layers anywhere in the blank area. And that will open up your layer styles panel. And then for this one, I did a drop shadow. So if you click the check mark, make sure this row is highlighted so that you get the controls in here. And you can see it's already kind of remembering, I think, what was done on this layer. But you would just adjust your distance, your opacity. These are the controls up here that I really work with. I don't usually change this bottom part. I like to use 135 for my angle if I want the light from upper left to lower right. Sometimes I change that, but generally that's what I use for most of my things. And that would be it. So I'm going to cancel that since it's already applied so it doesn't get too dark. And then once you've set a layer style on one image, on one layer, you can right click, you would click on copy layer style, and then go to the other layer, and you could, highlight one, and then, come on, highlight like the 2 others, right click and paste layer style. So you can easily apply it to all of them after only doing it once. Alrighty, so we've got those. So the next thing is we're going to add the word papillon on here. And I'm going to add well, I don't have to add a blank layer because our type tool is going to do that for us. So I'm going to select the type tool. I'm going to choose my font, which I used one of my favorites, Master of Break. I don't remember where I got that font, but you could do a Google search for it. There are lots of fun places to get fonts from as well. And I'm just going to type it as horizontal, and then I'm going to angle it afterwards. I'm going to change my color to 033844. Say OK. And I want it to be 85 point. Again, this is just because I've done it before. I already know that. Otherwise, you would pick a size and then you can change it as you go along. Oh, it didn't change the size. Okay. ILLONS. Hit our check mark. So I'm going to double click in the T on the layer to highlight my type. And then I'll change the size because it didn't change it to what I wanted. There we go. Now it did. So now I can use my move tool. And I'm going to move it over here. And I'm going to rotate this a little bit. And I kind of angled it to match the angle of this butterfly. And then I am going to do some layer effects on here. So we'll double click on this layer. Oh, thanks, Nancy and Susan, for posting. You can get that font from DaFont. It's one of the websites that I know I've used, so I probably did get it there. Again, make sure when you get these fonts, and that is a free site, check the terms of use to make sure that if you're planning to use it for a commercial project you plan to sell, you want to make sure that that's allowed. So we're going to do a couple things here. First, I'm going to add a stroke. So I'm going to click on the stroke. I want it to be on the outside. I'm going to make these letters a little bigger. I'm going to change the color to 799AA2, so a lighter blue. Make sure, let's say OK. I want my opacity at 100% and want it to be 7 pixels. And say, I don't really want to say OK, so I'm just going to click off of that. Because if I say OK, then it's going to close it, but we can always re-add it. So let me zoom in so you can see. It's a very, it's a lighter blue around it, but I just wanted to accent it a little bit. So we can double click to go back to our panel. I'm going to add an outer glow. Let me turn that off because we're not using that. Outer glow. And I use this at the blend mode of overlay. And some of these things I would have changed after the fact, but again, because I've done it, I already know what I want. Opacity 35, noise 10, and the color 226 D7A. And okay, here, and we want it to be a solid. So I don't want a gradient, I want a solid color. And the last thing is a drop shadow. And I love to do drop shadows, especially on type. I just think it adds, it separates it from the background like it is with the butterflies too. So we're going to do normal. I want it to be black, 32%. You'll see the noise in a second when I finish this. It adds a little, it's only to that glow. It's not to the whole image. So the distance, spread 45. And size. Come on. About there. So you can see the shadow showing. So let's say okay. So the glow, you can see, it's kind of hard to see, but it was something. Let's turn off the drop shadow. Maybe you can see it more. So if I turn it off, turn it on, it actually doesn't look like it's really showing, which is weird. So let's go back in and check it again. Let's bring the opacity up. Things are just like being weird today. Let's go to normal and see what happens. It doesn't look like much either. I see it changing a little bit. Let's turn off our shadow for a minute. Well, usually it shows up. It's just one of those days. What can I tell you? There must be a full moon tonight. I think there was actually the other night. But normally it just should be adding a little bit of a glow effect around there. I'm not sure why it isn't today. I'll just leave that there. How about if we do darken? Yeah, it's weird. Oh well, we're going to move on. And I'll show it to you again in the finished one. The other thing that I sometimes do to type, and I didn't on this one, let's go back 1 second, is sometimes I'll do the Bevel and Emboss, and that will kind of give a shadow to your type. So we can move this around so we get that angle again. And you can see as I move the depth how it gives a little more of a 3D look to the type. So I'm going to leave that here. I don't think I was doing that kind of stuff back then. Oh, maybe this was the spread at 0. Well, that could be a reason why. Oh, that would be why. There we go. Let's see, size. Oh yeah, there it is. Now you can see it a little bit. Thank you, Jean. Too many controls, and I didn't look. Yep. So that's why we weren't seeing the glow, because these were at 0. So thank you. Alrighty. So we can bring back the opacity a little there. So I like that, with the added bevel and emboss. So that's another thing you can add there. And then the last thing I want to do, let's size this back to our screen, is I'm going to add a little grunge. Surprise! Like I would ever do that, right? So I'm going to bring in a soft grunge overlay. And this one, let's see. So this was a combo of brushes I just created in black and white. I'm going to change the blending mode to overlay, and I left the opacity at 100%. And you can see the before and the after. So I added it as a lighter color. And then I'm going to bring in a grunge blue texture. This is from my grunge 8 collection. And this one I am going to rotate. So I'm just going to do it this way. You can also go into the edit menu and do an edit, transform, and rotate it 90 degrees. So either way is perfectly fine. And so we've got that one. So I'm going to change this. So what I wanted to do here was to change this to a black and white, because I wanted to add the grunge, but I didn't want more blue at this point. So I'm going to add a black and white adjustment layer. And I only want this layer to affect the texture, not my whole image. So I'm going to clip it to this layer. So let's close that for a second. And you can either hold the Alt or Option key and put your cursor like right between the layers and you get that little box, and then you'll just click. Or the other way is Control Alt G will do the exact same thing, or Command Option G on a Mac. So either way. And then I'm going to open that back up. So I'm going to do some changes to the colors, which are going to change the tones of the black and white. So I moved the cyans to there, and the blues I brought down to minus there. And then we're going to change our, we're going to do the blending mode, but first I wanted to create a mask here because I didn't want this over the whole image. I'm just trying to pick up the edges. So layer adjustments automatically add a layer mask, but I need the mask to be on the blue layer, not up here. So we're going to add a layer mask. Go back to my brushes. I'm going to pick up just a regular soft round brush. So I'm going to go up to the top here. Soft round brush, and we can use it fairly large. And we're just going to, oh, my foreground's got to be black, not white. And then we're just going to brush some of this off. And again, I'm just trying to keep the edges. I'm not going to probably be as perfect as I was the first time, but we're already more than a half hour in and we're on project 1. That's why I only did 2 projects for today. And from here, we're going to, let's see, I'm going to change this, black and white. We added the mask. And, okay, so what did I didn't write down the blending mode. Let's try multiply, which would be my guess of choices, and we'll just bring back the opacity because we want to darken it a little bit. And then I brought in one more last layer, and this is also another grunge. This is from my soft grunge brushes. Let's see, this one was created with the brushes. I'm going to change this one to darken. And I just brought it back a little bit, and it's actually in the wrong place. So let's move that up top. And then we're going to have to reconnect these two. I should have been on this layer when I added that. Instead, I was on this layer, so it added it in the middle. And, oh, there is one more step. We're going to add a blank layer, and I'm going to add a little bit more blue to this. So let's pick our color. 8BB, 6BD, and we're going to fill this with Alt backspace on a PC or Option Delete on a Mac, and we're going to change this to multiply and bring it way back to like 25%, just to give it that little extra pop of color and kind of tie it together. Phew. All right. No, dear, I'm not adding another layer. Dave's like, sure, you don't want to do one more. I know it's a lot of layers and a lot of pieces. And again, when you're doing things like this, I mean, this, you know, it's kind of a linear process, but it's not always that way when I'm creating these types of things. I might add something, come back, do some brushes. I probably didn't do those at that point. I would have maybe done them later on. And they're very subtle. And you could make them bolder if you wanted. You could make them a different color if you wanted. It's just lots of components, and it's a lot of trial and error and playing when you're doing this kind of stuff. So, Dave says, y'all like this one? I like it. It's one that, like I said, I created it a while ago, but I still really like it. So, Nancy says, emphatically yes. All right. So let's go on to our other project. So this one, again, was something that I found the inspiration on. Let's see. Question, is a way to erase off multiple layers at once? No, but there is an easy way you can copy that mask, and I will show you that when I get something else open. You can actually drag the layer mask holding the Alt key, and it will copy it, a mask to another layer. So you can do that very easily. Thank you, Peggy. I'm glad you like the way I explain techniques. Like I said, it's the way I created it, but there's just so much you could do with things like this. The replay will be up on the YouTube channel by tomorrow. It will download tonight, and then first thing in the morning, I usually get that rolling. So hopefully pretty early tomorrow morning you can. Shelley says, you can add 7,000 layers in Photoshop. No, we're not going to do 7,000 layers. Thank you. Alrighty, so let's start the next one. And this one, I'm going to show you, because I have it handy, my inspiration for this one. So this was a picture. This was not from Pinterest. This was in a hotel, hanging on the wall. And I just really liked the different textures it used and the way the colors were. So I took a picture of it. And this was my inspiration for this one. So we're going to start with a new blank file. I'll leave that in the back, and you can kind of see where we went with it. I mean, obviously this is a painting, so we're recreating it with different types of components. And I didn't want to close that. I wanted to go to new, file new. This one we are going to make 11 by 14. Same settings down here. We'll say create. So I used a couple of my own textures in this one. The first one, I'm going to bring in this deep red. And this was one of my own that I actually added a gradient map to make it an even darker color than the original. So we're going to start with that. And the original came from my Grunge 6 set, in case you're wondering. All right, and next I'm going to bring in the lighter color that I'm going to do the other section with. So let me go back and reopen the original so you can kind of see where I'm going. So that red is going to cover that part. Now I'm going to bring in another texture to create that section. So let's drag this one in. And I'm going to rotate it. And what I did for this one was I have my rulers up here. So I'm going to back off. So I want to move this texture so that the right side of it is at 8 inches and the bottom edge is at like 10.5. So I'm going to, following my, I just have to make it a little bit wider. So it's 8 inches across, and then I'm going to slide it down to my bottom. So if I put my cursor like right about at the edge, I can see where the line is over here. And that's about 10.5, and then I'm just going to size it to that shape. So I have my whole texture. Hopefully that makes sense. And then what I want to do is, these had kind of like a blurred edge between them. So I'm going to use a brush to blur these together. So to do that, I need to have these both on the same layer. And I know you've seen me do this before if you watch my webinars. I'm going to create a merge layer because I don't want to flatten these just because I want to leave them there. And to create a merged layer is Control, Alt, Shift, and the letter E. Be Command, Option, Shift, E on a Mac. So now we have those two layers together. I am going to come to my brush panel, and this is a Photoshop brush that I am using. This was actually one that I downloaded from the Adobe site. If you have the Photoshop Cloud, there are actually free brushes you can add to your panel. So if you come up under the gear wheel and go to Get More Brushes, it will take you right to the Adobe site. Okay, finish loading, thank you. And they keep adding sets all the time. So you can see there's quite a few in here that you can download. So all you would do is click it, and let's say we were using, I'll just pick one that I don't think I have in there, Concept. And you can see it downloads on Chrome, so it'll download down here. And if I just double click that, it's actually already added it to my brush panel. So it works even easier. And there it is there. I did have it already, and that's why it's got it too. So it's actually easier than even having to import it. Or you could save it to your hard drive and then do the same thing and come in here and import. So which one did I use for this? Brought that in, finding my spot in my own notes. Page. So we're going to use the watercolor set. And this is a huge set of brushes. So let me find it here. There it is, watercolor. There are a ton of brushes in this set. And I'm using the last one in the set. And it's called Spider Spread Blend. And it has the little like blending icon here, so that is what it's going to do, and that's what I wanted to do here. So I'm going to use the brush at the default size, and I'm just going to kind of go along this edge here and smudge those two colors together. And you may have to go over it more than once. You can make the brush bigger if you want to. I decided I wanted it to not be a huge, I'll zoom in though so you can see what I'm doing a little bit. And you can see how it's blending it. The more you go over it, the more it's going to blur it, because I wanted to get rid of that seam line in between there. And then this way I just went like that. You could rotate the brush if you wanted. But to save some time right now, we're just going to go like that. And this is, like I said, this is one from the watercolor set from Adobe. It's only if you have the Creative Cloud. So this is not available for if you're still working in CS6 or Elements. This is only for Creative Cloud. So that is good for that. So now I'm going to begin to composite my rose. And I actually used leaves and a rose from different images of my own. I'm going to bring over, I'm going to show you this folder of, this is how the process of, because I just created this project recently for today. Looking through different images that I had, trying to decide on what I wanted, and I was going to use this one, and I selected it out of the background, and then I decided I didn't really like the rose, so I ended up using this pink rose and selected that out, and then we're going to composite it. So there is, you know, a lot goes into creating these things, and it's, you know, just playing around and trying different things. So again, I'm going to drag these in, and because I saved them from the image, that'll make it faster for this process. I'm going to just bring in the individual leaves. Everything is going to be on a separate layer. And the last one. And this leaf over here was actually, I duplicated this one and then flopped it and rotated it because I didn't like the leaf that was over there. And then we're going to bring in the rose. And there we have it. So this should be down a little farther, so I might have not lined this up quite right because this stem should be there. So I'm just going to select all of these components, the rose and the stem, and then I can, because they're all highlighted, they'll move together, so I can just move that down a little bit. Again, the power of layers and having everything on a separate layer lets us change them. So I wanted to change the color of the rose a little bit. It was a little too pink for me for this. So I'm going to add a hue and saturation adjustment layer. And again, I want to clip that to this layer because I only want it to affect the flower, not anything else. And then I changed it to, I'm going to change the hue down to saturation. Sorry, I'm going to keep this at 0. And I'm going to change the saturation to 34 and the lightness to -7. Okay. And doesn't quite look right, but we may have to change that some more. So to make because I've got so many layers going on over here, you can group layers and kind of put them in a separate folder. So I'm going to click from here down to the stem, and I'm just going to do Control G, not the Control Alt G, but just Control G or Command if you're on a Mac, and that will give me a group. So if I open that little file folder, you see there's all the components of my flower, but now they kind of just makes my layers panel a little bit more manageable. I don't do that all the time, but sometimes when you start getting a lot like here, it does come in handy. Okay, so now I want to add layer styles to this. I want to do shadows and things, which you can see is kind of remembered. But if I do it to this group, it will add it automatically to all of the layers. So I can just double click there instead of an individual layer. And you can see it's actually remembered, you know, what I copied from the other finished project. But you would come in and I did a Bevel and Emboss. I did the drop shadow. So I'm not going to keep those because they're already on there, but you can add your layers effects right to that group. Does that make sense? So the next thing we're going to do, if we look at is to add this little red square up here. So I'm going to utilize this layer again. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to do a Control J and then drag it all the way to the top. And then I'm just going to make it smaller up here. And I want it to be about to the 2 inches, and then I'll bring it down a little bit there. All right, so that's that one. Now, page. All right, so now we're going to start adding some of the flourishes to give us kind of that look. And this is another brush set that I downloaded. I had this one from years ago, and I found it again on Brush Easy. And this is another free site. And in the notes, I actually put an illustration. Be careful when you're on some of these sites of what you click where it says download, because there's a lot of ads on these things, and sometimes you think you're clicking on the brushes and you're not. So in the notes, I actually put a picture of this. And this one says free download, like right next to the illustration of the brushes. So it's fairly obvious, but there is an ad right below it with a download button. So just, you know, be careful of where you're clicking when you go into sites. So this one, we're going to use several brushes from the same set. We're going to come in here. This set is called decorative brushes. It's decorative number 14 set. So let's find this one again. I know I have this one in here. Oh, I had too many things in there. Kind of a mess right now because I was trying a bunch of different things. That's not it. That's the one we used before. Oh, spider butterfly. Decorative. And they don't pop in order. They always add things to the bottom. So I'm just going to bring it in. You can see it brought it in again. So let's go here. I'm going to just import them. I'm going to go to my folder where everything is for today. My webinars, today's rose graphic. And of course I didn't put it in here, did I? Crud. Okay, so we need to find it because it's somewhere in here. Should be towards the bottom. Butterfly spatters. Boy. I think we're going to run over a few minutes. Yeah, use the search.
Use the search. You don't know the name of it.
That's a good idea. I always forget that that's there. Decorative. There it is. Koi Dreamer. Thank you. See, I always learn from everybody too. So, why aren't they showing? Yeah. Here it is. Okay. Phew. Knew it was here somewhere. Alrighty. So these are the brushes we're going to use for this. So again, I'm going to put these on a separate layer, each one. So I'm going to add a new blank layer. And then let's go to our brushes again. And we're going to click on number 1, 2, 3, 9. We're going to use this one. I put number 10 because I just had to count them. They're not really numbered. That other set was. Usually the number on a brush set like that is just the size of the brush. So we are going to make this one 2300 pixels. And let's see if we can get this one to rotate. Let's pick our color. CDA. EF. That's not right. CDAD. 8F. I was missing something in there. All right, so we're going to choose that. And then let's go to our brush settings panel. Hey, we can actually rotate it. Rotate it 90 degrees that way. And we're going to put this one up here, about like that. And then we're going to add another blank layer. Go back to our brush. Use brush number 6. And we are going to use this one at 1700. And we're going to rotate this one 10 degrees. I'm just going to type it because it's faster. And this one I put down here, I think, looking at my finished image. That doesn't look right. But we'll go with it because we're running out of time. And then I wanted to rotate it the opposite way and put it once at another layer over here. I used a different brush this time, but that's okay. You'll get the idea. And then this one we actually put a duplicate. I'm going to cheat and I'm going to do a Control J and use the move tool and rotate this one and then move it down. These have to be a little bit smaller. That's what happens when you hurry. You don't read your own instructions. So, and then this one we can move over a little bit. And then I added one more up in this little box. Let's see, it's number... Let's use this one. We'll just pick one for now. I'm going to size it, stamp it once. And then I wanted to do layer styles on all of these. So all you have to do is we'll pick the first one, open it up, and I did a bevel and emboss. So inner bevel smooth, depth I made 344, up size 35, soften 5, and say okay. And then again, this will be, I'm going to right click, copy the layer style, highlight the other 4, right click, paste layer style. So it does them all very quickly. And then all 5 of these, I'm going to highlight again. And let's see if we can lower the opacity of all at the same time. A little bit, about there. And then last step, I'm going to put a texture over this. This is one of my grunge overlays. Rotate it. Use our move tool. And about there. And then we're going to change this to, well, actually, before I did this, I did want to give this kind of an impression look, a painterly look. So I did a merge layer, Control-Shift-E, and I used Topaz Impression to do that before I did the grunge. And the grunge is like an optional step I put in here. So we're going to go to Add Filter, Impression, use brush number 9, brush size close enough, texture strength. Yep, I just kind of left it at that. I'm doing this really quick now, so let's bring some of these back. No, let's leave that there. I don't like that. It's remembering some of the things I did before. So you could do, you know, a painterly look, and you could add like a linen look to it, choosing one of these linen fabrics, and then adjust that texture strength. You can see it looks like fabric in there. And say accept. And I'll show you the actual finished one because I know I didn't quite get this one right. So I'm going to open up my other TIFF file. Come on. There we go. And I knew that pink rose was a little not quite right with the settings I had. So that is the, with the impression and the proper color, and then this is the texture. So it's like with and without the texture. I kind of like the extra dimension it added in here. But again, everything is always optional and to your taste. Phew. That was a lot of steps. And I know I went fast, so you will have the replay to watch again. If you haven't gotten your notes yet, they're just $5. They're on sale till next Tuesday. If you want to grab all the pieces and work along with it. And what's that, dear?
Tell people out their notes, check their junk mail, spam folders, and all that.
Yes, and if you did order notes, anytime you order from my store, it sends the email right away with the link to your order. You should get 2 emails. You'll get one from PayPal as a receipt, and then you'll get one that's from Meredith Images with your links. If you don't see those within, say, 10 minutes of your order, please check your junk spam folders. Some email systems love to send things to spam. And if you still don't have it or see it, then email me and I'll be happy to send you the link direct. But do check that first, especially Comcast lately. They've been, I've been reading some articles. They just block things with links and they don't even send it to your spam folder. They just boot it out into cyberspace somewhere. So if that happens to you, yep, somebody said you did find it in the spam. I can't do anything about that. That's just, you know, the way different you know, security features are in the various email systems, as well as whatever, if you're using like Norton or any of the antivirus things, sometimes that causes it as well. And I'm done talking. So I hope you all learned a lot. Again, I know we went a little quick, so, you know, do watch the replay and look around and just use things as inspiration. As you can see, like I did with this one, it just, you can take something that may not even look like the finished project, and, you know, it just, it's that spark to kind of get you thinking of things that you can do on your own. So I will see y'all again soon. Don't forget to, let's see, what are the flourishes names? Those were the, what was, it's back up here. I will put it in Thursday's blog as well. Those were the Koi Dreamer, decorative number 14. I'll type that in real quick. Koi. I have a direct link in the notes as well. So that is that one. Yeah, so check it out, and don't forget to check out our Creative Photography Conference. The virtual conference is coming up at the end of February. 2 days, 8 speakers, 13 hours of sessions, and if you sign up before the end of January, it's only $39. The price is $49 after that. I will see you all soon, and the link, the replay will be up tomorrow, and then there'll be some follow-up stuff in Thursday's blog. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great evening.